those things.
I have one down at the house.
Oh, well, run get it. We're here with Curtis Willard, who has been in Fairhope longer than I can remember.
Oh, it's been months now.
Yeah, months. And he's going to talk to us about a whole lot of things. Curtis, go ahead.
Golly, gee, all these. No, the first time I came down here, I think was probably about 1930. And as you may have guessed, I was a small boy, hadn't been born yet. But anyway, the Main Street was not paved. In fact, nothing was paved. And there were, down Fairhope Avenue, there were palm trees all down the street. And that had its charm, except when it rained. The palm trees did fine, but ooh, the red clay. And the road that went on up to Bridgehead, the old 98, was not paved. And you know that humdinger of a hill that is by Montrose Bay? That was one that you'd come spinning down, around and around and around. It's just as slick as glass, soapy glass. That was fun. But in Fairhope, when I moved here, was in 1936. And now the Main Street was paved all the way to the corner at the organic school, and that was the end of the pavement. And for years it was like that. And when you got out at the Busy Bee Garage, you were really out in the country.
That's right. Really
out in the country. And now you wouldn't believe it. It looks like, what's this, Las Vegas or something going on out there. It just,
I might add that
traffic.
Yeah, the Busy Bee Garage was on the corner of Fairhope Avenue and Greeno Road at that time.
Yeah, on the northwest corner.
Right.
And across the street was the Cody Potato Shed. All of those were on the Fairhope film.
Well, was that shed there when you were little?
You know,
no,
I don't know.
It wasn't. I know it wasn't, because that was my grandfather's property for up until the 40s. Mm-hmm. And it was pine trees, and I used to go out there with Daddy. And
across the street was a pecan orchard.
Right.
I got one right.
Yeah, that belonged to this year's Uncle Ben, who lived in New York City.
Exactly. We bought it from him.
Yeah, and that was, then he got it back in, about 1912.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. I don't remember that too well, 1912.
Well,
That's a little before my time. But anyhow, what was going on in 1936? Not much.
So you moved down here in 36?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there was a fearsome depression going on.
And how old were you?
I was 10.
10, okay. And so you were in school. Did you go to public or organic?
Well, I went to the organic school.
Mm-hmm.
Did
you know Mrs. Johnson?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. What do you remember about her?
Stern.
Oh, really?
Yeah, very stern. But then, with a pupil like me, I can understand that. Yeah. Yeah.
You brought out her worst side, huh?
I was always, I won't say a maverick, but I was always interested in things, intensely so. And I ran the projectors at the theater from the time I was 12, and fascinated with the technology. The gears, and not just the fact that it was machinery, but the torques and the pressures and thrusts and all of that involved with the design of the things. And then the optics and the arc lamps and the sound systems. I mean to tell you, I was in hog heaven. But I was always working on something. And I remember that one time that Steve Riggs and I had attempted to put sound on a silent projector. And it worked.
It worked?
It did. We had no optics in the sound head. We used a slit and tin, and the thing worked. But we couldn't get enough light to the photocell, so we thought anyway, to really make it work like we would like for it to. So I got the bright idea that if we were to divert the 1,000-watt light from projection to that slit, that we'd get more light to the photocell. Not so. Didn't make any difference. And that really worried me. And I remember that I was in shop one day with Philip, was it Van Zandt? Philip Sant? Sant. Mm-hmm. When it dawned on me why I didn't get any more light to that slit. Now I just had to prove it. And I told Philip that I need to go back to the room and do some work back there. Could I leave the shop? And I have a feeling that he was relieved. Any time that I left was an improvement. But between the shop and the Bell Building, I met Mrs. Johnson. Where are you going? I'm going back to my class. Where do you belong? Well, I was in the shop. Well, what is your project in the shop? Well, I don't exactly have a project. Well, you should have. And she became rather forceful on the thing and expelled me. For 3 days, I could go and experiment with the slit and the light.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, it was. It was. And when I got through, I knew why. I didn't have any more light on the photocell with 1,000 watts than I did with 75 watts.
Well, I would ask, but I might not understand.
You would understand it
Okay,
if we
tell
played
me.
with it just a little bit.
Okay.
It's a matter of utilizing the size of the light source. The 75 watt was a filament about so long by maybe 1/8 of an inch thick. And I was utilizing virtually all of the light to the slit. A 1,000 watt light bulb had a filament arrangement that was bigger than a wheat check. But you see, that wouldn't go through the slit. Only the small portion would go through the slit. And the only way that I could get more light through there was to back it up, take a lens and focus it down and concentrate the light. That would do it. But the way we were doing it, it would not have increased the amount of light. And of course did. So, but anyway, it's that kind of thing. I don't know how I got off on all of that. I was forever in some project that was outside of school.
Did Mrs. Johnson ever know about your discovery?
I haven't the slightest idea. And so, in a way, I kind of avoided her because she frightened me just a little bit, you know. Well, she was a formidable personality, but she loved a lot of people, and Mark Arnold and Kenny Kane and all people that she really had much regard for. So I don't get the idea that I in any way am talking down about Mrs. Johnson. I can understand her feelings toward me anyway. But there's Mrs. Riggs, who was to me a rather peculiar personality because she was so on and off. One time you'd see her and she was glad as heck to see you. Next time you see her, she would snub you, just cut you off like that. I don't know why, what it was all about.
That artistic temperament.
Oh my, yes. And she had been in the theater,
Yeah.
and up in New York. She was, well now theater, that tells you where. See, the theater, that's in Chicago. The theater is in the Northeast.
Okay.
Ah, yes, that's right, and she was from the theater, and she was a bit actress there, character actress. The old Schubert Theater. Plays put on there. And boy was she an actress, but I'll bet you one thing you didn't know, she could sing. She had a silvery, clean soprano, beautifully controlled. It sounded very much like Jeannette McDonald did. She could hit those high notes as did Jeannette McDonald, with that perfect control and dead-on frequency. And I always enjoyed that. But she seldom sang. I've never heard her sing anything all the way through. Nor have I ever heard her play anything on the piano all the way through, even though that was her thing.
She taught us singing when I was going to organic school. So
Yeah.
I just assumed that she could sing, I guess. I don't
Oh,
remember her
yeah,
singing.
but sometimes, well, listen to the church choir and then listen to the person who's leading it. Very often, they're not really too great. But Mrs. Riggs was. And she was a sparkling personality when she wanted to be, and she could be hell on wheels when she wanted to be. And she would throw on, when she threw a mad, there'd be this cloud would show up in the room, and lightning would come out of it, and rain would pour out of the thing. And it was very impressive, very impressive.
I remember her watching the kids do rehearse, and they did something wrong, and she goes,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. Well, I benefited much by her, and once again, I don't want to talk down about her, but what I'm saying are things that I remember, and I'm sure a lot of others do too. that she was a very powerful personality. And when she turned on that powerful personality, it was very impressive.
Yes,
Very
I
impressive.
never felt alienated by her. I felt very close to her, but knew that she meant for us to behave.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, she also had the thing that I find in the academic world, and that is that you have to be like me. I mean, you have to, if I approve of you and your lifestyle and your plan for life and that sort of thing, then you're all right.
Mm-hmm.
But a little deviation from it, and the academic world is bad about that. They try to clone everybody to be like me. And I was, once again, I would say not a maverick, but I was an independent thinker, and didn't want to be distracted by rules and regulations that said I had to wear brown shoes with brown pants, or couldn't wear black shoes with brown.
Pan the camera down.
Yeah.
Shall we get your
That's
black
tilt.
shoes and brown?
Tilt the camera down. You
Just
pan
pan
left and right. That's
sideways.
right. As a broadcaster, filmmaker, why? Yeah. No, where were we? I ran the movies.
Yeah.
Don Stubblefield.
And when you were 12 years old?
Yeah. Yeah. We had gone to New Orleans.
That was 1938 or something?
1938. Yeah.
My goodness.
And I loved it. That was just great. And I had. It didn't bother me that I was locked up in that room for such long hours. You'd have a matinee in the afternoon. It'd be about 2 hours, 2.5. And then 2 shows at night, start at 7:15, run the same shows twice. Get through around 11:30, 12 o'clock. Then you go out and change the letters on the marquee.
I remember seeing
Yeah.
you out there.
Up on the ladder, quivering back, trying to get Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs up there. You can't do it. It won't fit on the
Won't fit.
marquee. You can, the only thing you do is put up Snow White. Everybody knows what it means. But it was a time when the movies were fun. And during that time, too, I guess probably 38, 39, 40, perhaps 41 was a time when Hollywood was at its peak. The really big pictures were being made then that are still big. Gone with the Wind was shot mostly in 38, 39. And The Wizard of Oz was another one that,
Yeah.
and it's still going full blast. And up a couple of years later came Citizen Kane, and then there was Rebecca and Wuthering Heights. Wuthering Heights to this day is a classic in how to direct a picture. Sit and watch it. Sit and watch it and notice the camera movement and the timing of the dialogue and the way they set a mood and maintained it all the way through. So that was just one more factor in running the movies. You could appreciate the artistry of them and the music from these things. This was also the heyday of Jeannette McDonald and Nelson Eddy, and those that I had that were ahead of me, we repeated during that time. Naughty Marietta and Maytime. I'm sure you remember those. They made one, I think, about 1940 entitled New Moon, and I think it was the best one that they made, beautifully recorded. Jeannette McDonald, I had a great experience with her. But anyway, when she first started acting, she looked as if she was out of the silent screen era. She was full of these, Mrs. Riggs was too. Mrs. Riggs was one of her,
That's what Bertha said. When she didn't like something, she would go,
there you go.
no, and no.
Well, by the time they made New Moon, she was out of that era, and it was a good one. But gee, it was the time too. Now we used to go down. There was a casino at the bottom of the Bay Hill, and it was on the north side of where you now, just to the right, if you're walking out to the pier. I would guess probably in the general area where the fountain is, just maybe to the right of that a little bit, not much. And when I wasn't working and I was with my friends, we'd go down. Not always, because I really wasn't into that kind of thing, but we'd sit at a table, and there were just tables all out on this ground floor. And the jukebox it cost a nickel to play a record. And they'd drink Coca-Colas, and the kids would dance. I wasn't a dancer. That kind of hurt my social life, I think. But am not now a dancer. and some said I was kind of tame, which translates as dull. And yeah, so
Oh, come on, I can't
Really?
believe that.
yeah, oh yeah, sure. But anyway, that was kind of a center. And it was the time of on the jukebox was Glenn Miller and Tommy Dorsey and Jimmy Dorsey and Artie Shaw and Benny Goodman. Yeah. And during that time, a thing happened at Republic Pictures in Hollywood. Huh? Yeah. Big deal. Well, they'd always made westerns and had really made their way with Gene Autry. So you can imagine how big a company they must have been. And but then they came along in, I think, about 1939, with a movie with a gal who came out of Brooklyn, and her name was Judy Canova.
Oh yeah.
And they made a film entitled Scatterbrain, and Corn for Corn's Sake, and it was a hit, and it was one of the things that made Republic really go. And I remember that so well, and the music from that thing, and Judy Canova. And I have bits of film out of that. Not here, but I do have little bits of that film. Mm. But it was a great time. It was a great time. Howard Ruge was mayor and had been for a long time at that time. So I don't know, they paved Main Street and they finally, you know, for a long time you parked sidewise. You didn't have the, is that parallel?
Perpendicular.
Yeah, okay, you didn't have the angled parking. And the street was narrower. And when they widened the street, it did away with the bicycle rack out in front of the theater, where every day when I'd come roaring up to run the show, I'd take aim, land between two spokes on that bicycle rack, and come sailing up to that and ka-chunk land right in it, you know, look around, see if anybody'd see me, how wonderful I'd done it. But when they widened the street and put in the diagonal parking, the palm trees disappeared. And
The whole what do you call it, tree lawn disappeared.
Yeah.
It was street right up to the sidewalk.
Yeah, just about. Yeah, just about. So that was another change in Fairhope. The post office was right across the street from the theater. Not far enough for me to have something to carry the film, but too far to carry the film. But since I was incredibly strong, you can tell, look at these shoulders, muscle. Well, a 4-reel can of film, 80 pounds.
How many?
80 pounds.
80, okay.
Yeah. And it wasn't uncommon to get pictures that were in 6 reels, and then you'd have chapter 5 of The Perils of Nyoka, and the latest. Well, no, wait a minute. The Perils of Nyoka was serious stuff. Yeah. And Paramount News, or Fox Movie Tone News, and the Warner Cartoons. The Warner Cartoons, marvelous music and recording. Mm-hmm. That was just great. But I'd have to carry these films across the street to the post office. Now that was an interesting thing. I had a wonderful girlfriend, and she would come see me just virtually every day. If I remember it right, she usually came on the first day of a film, and if she wasn't coming, she would miss it. I kind of wondered maybe if sometimes maybe it wasn't the movie she came to see. But anyway, in the summertime, it'd be 110 easy in the projection room, and I've carried probably a couple of 100 pounds of film back and forth. And by the time she'd get there at 25 minutes after 3, I bet I smelled like a horse. Perhaps a dead one. And there was no air conditioning then. No air conditioning, and no effective deodorants either. Yeah, so it, I don't know why I could get into something like that.
You recorded it for posterity.
Yeah. But that was
good, because people didn't, might not even remember that there was a time.
There was no air conditioning. That was a very rare thing. I remember one day.
Didn't they have big exhaust fans in the theater?
We had 2 5-horsepower fans back in the back, and they really did shove the air through. Well, one day I noticed that the big-time picture shows And Chicago always had this nice odor about them. So I went up to, was it Walker's at that time? Not sure. Might have been before Walker's, or before that dime store was there.
Well, what did he call it to begin with? He didn't call it Walker's, he called it something else.
Well, anyway, I got one of these little dime things of rose fragrant perfume.
Shell. It was Shell.
Yeah.
That's right, Shell store.
Well, it was about so big, cost a whole dime, which back then was a pretty good investment. And I took it back and I poured it into that big fan, which sprayed it out into the theater. Now, my friend, that stuff is made to have one drop. We didn't have roaches for months after that. And we even lost a few customers. Yeah, I sure did. Something I wrote about was one day we ran during the summer of 1940. We ran from 10 o'clock in the morning on around. We had a what is it? The veterans thing, big time veterans convention here, whatever they call it.
American Legion?
Yeah, that's what it was. And we'd start at 10:15 in the morning. Come up in the afternoon, man, what with all the equipment in the projection room, and the fact you couldn't open the windows because the light goes through the portholes to the screen. And it was the 4th of July. I remember that. Hotter than shucks. And so I had this beach chair up there that I would lounge in. It was between projector number 1 and the wall, and it was a tight squeeze to get that thing in there. Well, I had taken my legs and brought them under me, like that, under this, not under mine. And the way a beach chair was made, this is one of these folding things, see? Mm-hmm. And they have these scissors kind of like things on them. And the bell rang for me to go strike the arc to put it, fire up the next reel, to go to the next reel, make a changeover. And when I got up, that dowel stick popped out of the back. And that fool thing caught my ankles and was about to chop off my feet, and I couldn't get out of there. I couldn't turn it over, there wasn't enough room. And I couldn't pull myself up. This thing really had me. Finally, I heard it go. I heard a rip, bang, and then I heard it, and all the people clapping out in the auditorium, and I couldn't do a thing about it. Really run out. End of part 3, the whole bit. Well, after a while, the manager, Eddie Tomerlin, came into the projection room. Man, boy, he stormed in there, and he saw me, and he looked at me a bit, and I was pleading to help me out of there. And he started to laugh. And he went hysterical. He was laughing his head off, and I was suffering. And this was. Finally, I guess he had pity on me, or perhaps it was the show must go on. I'm not too sure which, but it might have been both. But anyway, he helped me up, and the show went on. So, but now people all over town knew about that. Willard got caught in the beach chair up in the projection room. That way, it wasn't the inconvenience of having the show go bad was really more fun than the show had been. So. Oh my.
What goes on behind the scenes, huh?
No, I don't know. I mostly I ran films. From time to time, we'd go down to, after the show, down to Gulf Shores. There was a big casino down there. Once again, the tables and the jukebox. And that was the whole thing back then. Well, I'm sure there were people smooching up behind those big clumps of grass out there and all, but I didn't have a girlfriend.
Do you want to clarify for future generations what smooching is?
No. Well,
just let them guess.
They called it petting, and but for the most part, it wasn't the kind of interpretation that would be applied to it today. It was more of an innocent time. It really was. It truly was. Mm-hmm. But one night during the war, we had first of all the semi-blackout, and then we'd have total blackouts from time to time. The top half of the headlamps were painted black to keep the light from getting up in the sky, so it would silhouette the coastline for submarines that were supposedly out in the Gulf. And one night, Everett Carnley and somebody and I went down, and down was now 59 towards Gulf Shores. Back then, there was nothing down there except that big casino and a big tree line before you get to the beach. And we got to the tree line, soldiers came out at us with guns, and a Jeep came out with a machine gun tripod mounted on it. And they shoot us on back. And I really wanted to know what it was all about, but I decided not to ask any silly questions. But we were close to that, and they felt that there was a good chance that saboteurs would be coming in there, as they had up in New Jersey. So now we had the Atmore, what is now the prison up at Atmore, was a prisoner of war camp, and we had most of them that were up there were Italian soldiers. And I used to service the equipment at the theater in Bay Minette. Going up there one day, I got behind a convoy, and it was a prison thing. And the last Jeep in the convoy, they were taking prisoners up to the camp up there. The last one in there was, the last one on the line was a Jeep with a tripod-mounted machine gun. And don't pass. And they were creeping along, but don't pass. Some guy decided he would pass. And when he went on around, the guy with the machine gun, bap, 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 and that guy stopped and slid back in behind me. And that's the whole story. They jolly well meant business. It was a serious time.
I never knew it got that close to us,
Yeah.
for heaven's sakes.
Yeah. Well, they'd been trained. Don't mess with them.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, let's see, one night, during all this blackout thing, and it wasn't a blackout, it was a semi-blackout at the time, I wondered if by moving the crater of the arc closer to the mirror, that if I could focus the crater at a greater distance. But you see, the mirror is made for 32 inches.
What are we talking about?
And the arc lamp and the projector.
Okay.
The focal point's at 32 inches, which means that if I move it forward to broaden the beam out, that the formula on the parabola of the mirror is wrong. I didn't know how wrong, and I thought, well, I'd like to know. So the old water tower that was up Fairhope, you've already guessed it. Here, I guess it must have been 9 o'clock or something, and I turned that arc light up on the water tower, and son of a gun, man, boy, it really lit it up. And I don't think it was 30 seconds before I had the intrepid police force in the projection room with me.
Oh my.
Yeah, they probably saved me from the Marines. Yeah.
Well, was that during a blackout that this happened?
Well, it was a kind of, I guess you'd call it a dim out. I wasn't what they called it either. When we'd have blackouts, there were no lights, none. It was just pitch black dark.
Right.
Yeah, and we had black window shades and all.
But you wouldn't have done that during a blackout.
No,
okay,
no.
so it wasn't during a blackout.
No.
But they still didn't like it.
No, they took a very dim view of it. That was the impression I got. Yeah. Oh, well, so many things pop into my head. You'd mentioned the cloud fights in Big Head Gully.
Oh, yeah.
And the few times that I was with my friends down there, why we'd have cloud fights, but that sounds kind of like a war. But it was a fun thing.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, it was. We'd team up. I'd always try to be on the side with Carolyn, and Carolyn Nichols, and Carolyn would always finagle some way to be on the other side from me, and that was always very disappointing because Carolyn was about as cute as possible to be and still be legal. But that would be, the girls would be Carolyn Nichols, Helene Stapleton, Marietta Stursel, Marion Russell. Those girls were called the Four Toots. Mm-hmm. They called the Four Toots. They also called themselves gold diggers. Boys would have been myself, Leonard Roden, Steve Riggs, Mordecai Arnold. Clarence Strand might have been in that. I think maybe he came along a little later, but I remember that after running up one side and down and up the other side and back and forth and dodging clouds and grabbing and so forth, that I'd be so exhausted I could hardly make it back home. And I think it affected them all that way. It was a
Big Head Gully was a place to really run off some energy.
Yeah.
It really was.
Yeah, yes it was. There were some places, some gullies up north of the pier where you had genuine quicksand. It just wasn't very deep, and you'd go to your ankles just like that.
Oh, wow.
It looked solid, but it wasn't. And it always worried me. What would you do if it went deeper than that? But of course it didn't. So that's the way it goes. My grandparents lived up on the bluff, and on a clear day, you could read the sign on the battle house. It was painted on the great big battle house painted on the side of the hotel in Mobile, and you could read it from over here. Now you're doing good if you can see Mobile.
Yeah.
And remember, do you remember when the porpoise used to come in with the kids?
Yeah.
And the porpoise were just happy, friendly, and never hurt anybody that I know of. And the mullets, or mullet, plural, more than two in fact, several, 1,000 maybe, would be out there, and the porpoise would start to chase a school of those things. And it raised the darndest rumpus you ever heard. And if you were out there in a rowboat, you've already got it. You'd get a boat full of mullet because
They will jump.
oh yeah, yeah, and the water would just turn white with the mullet being chased by the porpoise. More than one.
Yeah, I
They
remember
used to
that.
they used to look like they're so large that when they'd come up and go over, they looked like they were in slow motion. They were beautiful things. And the pelicans were there. I think they're pretty much back.
Yeah. We have seen porpoises.
Really?
Yes. Or dolphins.
Well, they
they're
might
slow.
have been.
They roll kind of slow, and I don't
Yeah.
know. I would think they were porpoises, but I wouldn't swear to it.
Yeah. Well, they were out there, and now and then after the show, why, we'd go down and swim. Well, you can imagine the summertime, 110 degrees projection room. I was ready for
Cooling off.
Yeah, really. The friends that I had were all expert swimmers. I was not, and swam like fish, maybe better. And I remember that one day we were up at Stencil's Fishing Camp on Fish River. Do you remember Stencil's Fishing Camp? Aha! If you remember, it was about a mile north of Marlow. And back then, Marlow, the only way to get on this side of the river was on a ferry. And the ferry is one of these things where you ring the bell, and the old fella comes out and gets on his ferry, and then with a cable pulls the ferry across to the other side. You drive up on it or get on it or whatever, and then you pull back to the other side, and it costs a whole dime. But anyway, from Stencil's Fish Camp, the 4 kids, except me, they decided they'd swim down to Marlow, and they did. And they had an orange knee-high or whatever, grape knee-high, popular thing of the day, nickel, whole nickel. Somebody had money.
Yeah.
And then they would swim back upstream that whole mile.
Good heavens.
Yeah, and it seemed not to bother them at all. And yet that's quite a feat. And people like Carolyn, who was kind of a delicate little thing. And by the way, if you ever arm wrestle with her, watch out. Because she was like a machine. All kinds of torque. Just be careful. Just be careful.
I'll be sure and not arm wrestle with her.
But those kind of things surprised me. And down at that Fly Creek, Devil's Hole, where they had the rope and the way up, tied way up in the air, and the kids would dive from way up there. I think it was about 30, 35 feet, and they were great divers too. So that was a fun thing.
Before we got on camera, you mentioned someone who dived off the wharf.
Yeah, Millard Bush. Yeah, he dived off and broke his neck. And he was down at Doc Jordan's old clinic that was down on the bay. That was south of Fairhope and north of Point Clear.
Yeah, okay.
And on the bay side. But he died a terrible death. It was terrible. But old Doc Jordan, we talked about him, and I enjoyed him so much. And we would get in discussions, and they were. Have you heard the music from? I think it's The River, done by Roger Miller. Well, if you get a chance, there's one in that. There's a number in that where some guy is yelling and swearing and using all kinds of bad language with regard to the government. Now, when you hear him, now a Baptist probably couldn't stand it. Who's a Baptist?
We're not.
Probably couldn't stand it. But on the other hand, it's such a great description of his experience with the government, everybody recognizes it. And everybody cheers. Oh, that's disgusting. That's disgusting. Yay, it's great. But old Doc Jordan was like that. The government was getting into his business and telling him how he had to do everything. And he took a very dim view of it, and he would vent these things on me. And of course, I'd give him a rough time because I figured he deserved it. But anyway, Doc Jordan had the only facility that you could go to for many, many years if you had to be. Well, first of all, he was there to set bones and all that sort of thing. But if you had to stay there, you could. And he had finally put an operating room in there, and he'd do all kinds of surgery, no telling what was going on back there. But babies were born. Several of my children were born there. Yeah. And that was charming, if only because it was such a rustic place. It was all mildewed sheetrock, more or less nailed to rotting 2x4s, and you could smell it, you know. And then that's about right. And many of the homes in Fairhope are like that, by the way. People would come down from the north and retired, getting away from the rat race, or what I call the hellhole of the city, and come down here and appreciate the pelicans and the peace and the quiet and the warm Alabama breezes and all of those things, and live in these little, what they call cottages. And you could smell the rotting wood. And it was just a different world, that's all. And they all have very low ceilings, I remember that. But it was, nowadays, if you live like that, the government would come and say, well, we can't have this sort of thing. Yeah, that's right. And they'd cart you off to some brick place with concrete floors. So, yeah. But I think everybody loved old Doc Jordan. My mother surely did. She worked for him for years. By love, I don't mean romantically so, but total, thoroughgoing respect for the man, because he put in long hours and he had great feeling, empathy for the people that he worked on and who worked for him. He was a good man.
Well, as late as the late 50s, he was making house calls, which was not too common even then. Because I remember. Yeah,
that's right. Well, he was, in his last days, he was zipping up and down the halls as well as he zipped in a wheelchair there at Thomas. And my mother was in there, and so was Wayne Porter. Remember Wayne? He died of a brain tumor. Yeah,
hospital.
He died of a brain tumor. But anyway, my mother was going through one of her dying things, and she really was. She had a lot of bad things happen to her. But I was at the station one day, and word came in that old Doc Jordan had died. And it was like something had been pulled out from under me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that old doctor in Fairhope would make enough news for it to make the rounds at the television studio. I'm sure we put it on the air, and I don't remember. But it wasn't bulletin material. It was just that people knew him enough where it was an event. Hey, old Doc Jordan died, and everybody felt the loss.
And everybody knew him, and
yeah.
I think everybody did have a lot of respect for him.
Yeah, complete with his. Oh, he had his. What was it? He had. I think he took his cue from Lionel Barrymore.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it. That's it. That's it. You know, Dr. Kildare movies and all of that. Yeah, he played it to the hilt. Yeah.
Well, I remember about the house call. He came to my neighbor's house. I called him. The child was having convulsions. He came in his bathrobe and his
Yeah,
slippers
that's him.
and his hat and his bag.
Mhm.
And he didn't want to come. He was really grumpy with the parents or the aunt, whoever was taking care of the child, because he had told them that day the child needed to be in the hospital. But he came anyhow when I called him.
Well, and then part of his stock and trade was to be grumpy.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
that's right.
after all, you are interfering with my lifestyle, which was to be grumpy. But he had this great sense of humor. If you ever got through to him, he was fun. He really was.
He came when my oldest child was born, Ruth Ann. We lived out in the country, and he came out there, out Morphy Avenue, and they had just put in red dirt they were going to pave it, and it had rained for 30 days before she was born.
That figures, yeah.
And I had Mrs. Smart. She came. She did midwife, not midwife, but she came when babies were born and stayed, helped the doctor, and then stayed for 10 days afterwards. She didn't get up for 10 days. And Dr. Jordan came, and he got stuck about where the Hoffman's place is out on Morphy Avenue.
Yeah.
And we were out almost to the end of it, and he had to walk in his white. He got up. He was all dressed up in white.
Oh my.
And he had to walk all the way out there, and he was.
But he was proud of his country doctor position in the world. Really, he was.
Well, he apparently liked it, or he wouldn't have stayed here and done all these things.
He had a sense of responsibility. But that was part of his thing, and he fulfilled it. He most assuredly did.
He liked gossip too. I mean, he liked to kind of probe around and see what was going on.
Well, he would not have found out anything from me. Maybe that's one reason we got along so well. Yeah. Oh, right.
He was just interested, really.
One of the pictures that I saw in the paper the other day of the group up there is one I took. And you may have seen it around town. I took 2 pictures that day. The whole entourage there at the Jordan Clinic. And Dr. Johnson, Dogman, was that her name, Dr. Dogman?
Mm-hmm.
She was there. I can't remember all the people. And Mary. Mary Johnson, my cousin. And Mary, well, back up. But anyway, there are 2 pictures that I took that day, and I've seen them around from time to time in town. I've still got one of the negatives down here. Yeah. And what was it that I thought of that I was going to throw in there? And well, that's the way it goes sometimes. Yeah, miss it.
All comes in a rush. I can't remember
Yeah.
that one. Did you what station did you work for in Mobile?
WKRG TV and the 2 radio stations,
Mm-hmm.
which have recently been sold off.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate that. Kenneth Giddens and I were good friends. Apart from, I knew the man who, apart from the image making, the political scene, big time business and all that, Mr. Giddens was in more things you can imagine. He was also head of the Voice of America in Washington. And because of him, I met quite a few upper echelon political people, and for some reason he would invite me into meetings with these people. And when Mr. Nixon was thinking about running, why a group came down out of Washington headed by Frank Shakespeare, which is a name you perhaps don't know, but he became head of the United States Information Agency, which is why Mr. Giddens was then selected to head up the Voice of America. But with John Sparkman and people of his ilk, and I tell you, a man that you would have enjoyed, that if you just saw him, pictures of him, and all, you would say, well, typical Southern politician. But he wasn't, and it was Jim Allen. He was a man of insight, and great to sit and just discuss things. But you see, I got to work with people like that. And Sam Rayburn. Now, Sam Rayburn was a man that was used to having an entourage around him. And nobody could get to him, and if you wanted to say anything to Mr. Rayburn, why, you said it through his cohorts. But we had him in the studio, and I wanted to shoot him on a short lens. I said I would work camera. And so I went up to him, and I said, I'm going to shoot you on a very short lens, and I'm going to be moving in and out with the camera very close to you. Just don't ignore it. I just want to get the best shots of you that are possible, and that's the way I want to do it. And he looked at me like I was crazy. Who am I just to walk up and talk with him? But when we went on the air, he ignored the movements of the camera, and I got up probably within 2 feet of him, boomed up the camera, you know, and then come back and boom down on the camera as I pulled back. And he died maybe 3 months after that. Died of cancer out in Texas, his home was Texas. So,
Well, were you a cameraman? Was that what you did for the television station?
I wound up chief engineer for the corporation. I was
Oh,
there
that
for
tells me a
32
whole
years.
lot. What did
Well,
you do as chief engineer?
Well, I had 24 men under me, and we had the television studios, the television transmitter, FM transmitter, FM studios, the AM studios, and the AM transmitter, and then all the personnel, and then all this foolishness with the government. That just got worse and worse and worse, and so I was pretty busy.
So you had to keep all that equipment going? Is
Well,
that
our
what you
see
did?
to it mostly, but there were some things, usually in the television, why?
Well, on what occasion, why were you behind the camera with Sam Rayburn?
When we first started, the engineering ran camera, along with video switching and audio and all of that.
Oh, I see.
And on some shows, I enjoyed working camera, and I wanted to work that one on Sam Rayburn,
Okay.
and indeed did. And one of the most charming things that one of the most charming people you'd ever want to meet and work with was Minnie Pearl. Really?
Oh, yeah.
Howdy! and she always wore, no matter what, she always wore the hat with the tag on it. But what a great sense of humor, and what a warm, really loving, adorable person she was. And I guess she still is. She's had a stroke. She's kind of down and out right now.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But I've heard that she was a wonderful person.
But I got to work with her, and Jim Arness and people like that, and Fannie Flagg, and who was the guy that played Goober? George Lindsay. She and he were by the station, and we just tore the place up. She has this great sense of humor. These two people were just outright idiots, and we had a great time, a great time.
Do you happen to remember the name of the man who worked for WKRG Radio when he got a knock on the side door one night about 10 o'clock, and this guy with a guitar strung over his shoulder says, "Do you ever let people play in there live?" And he said, "Well, sometimes we do, but I don't know. I'll have to talk to my manager." So he made a phone call, and the manager told him, or whoever, director, whatever, told him no. Don't let him in. And it just so happens that man was Elvis Presley.
The announcer was probably Martin.
I remember him telling it on the air several years after Elvis
Well, he
became
went
famous.
from us to WWL in New Orleans and became a national figure with a thing called a nighttime show, a late show. He played records and he talked. And he would do some poetry or just comments on the condition of mankind and all, you know. And it was the title of the program was Moon Glow with Martin.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that's the same.
Could have been the same person.
Yeah.
Well, what happened with the station when Frederick came? Did it demolish a lot of stuff?
We really had to back up to Camille.
69.
In
Camille.
'69, I had been with the.
That's a hurricane, by the way.
Yeah, Camille was a sure enough hurricane, and I had had a number of discussions with the emergency management people and concluded they really weren't equipped to handle the problem. And but they were extremely official. And when the storm hit, indeed, they lost all their facilities, which left us high and dry because we had counted on them because we had to. So when it looked like Frederick was coming in, the Miami Weather Bureau would call me at the house every 2 hours. They'd call me all night long, and that stupid thing was coming up exactly up the computer path, exactly. So up on Wednesday afternoon, I think it was Wednesday afternoon, why I began to move people out to the transmitter with tape machines, and I had set up a thing with Bob Horner, who was the news director, one of the fellows from radio, and Terry Hammond, who was the transmitter supervisor, and myself. And I said, what we're going to do is we're going to take in information from emergency management, if we can get them, unless they lose their facilities. We're going to take in information from our two-way radio from cars that we've got spotted out all out in the boondocks, and also on 2-meter ham radio. I had been warned by emergency management that we could only take information from them, and I told them that our responsibility went way beyond Mobile County, that we went from Gulfport, Mississippi to Niceville, Florida, Thomasville to the north, and that I couldn't be confined like that. Well, anyway, the storm got going. There's fun things that happened there. But about 9 o'clock, we lost the emergency management thing in Mobile. Their equipment went down. We were blown down. Antennas were blown down. The only pass we had out of there was 2 meters. One of our men was on 2 meters. Jack Crisp, who was a weatherman back then. And so we had information from there. I had Bill Jordan out at Highway Patrol, the 2-way radio, and it blew the place away. He says, there's just nothing to report. He says, there's roof and things flying in every direction out here. I said, well, that's enough. Well, we were talking with a man in Foley, and we heard this loud crash. Never heard from him again, and to this day I have no idea what happened, because that was the end of it. But I told the people on the air.
Was he just a citizen?
Yeah.
Reporting to you? Okay.
Sure, and we told the people on the air that we'll give you all of the official information exactly as we get it. And what other information we get that we think is anywhere near reasonably reliable, we'll pass it on to you, letting you know that it is unofficial. And we don't want to panic anybody with false information. And we'll keep rotating these things around and around and adding to it as the time goes on through the night, if we stay on the air. As it turned out, we were the last ones. We were the only ones still on the air. And and we kept the information going.
Well, did you have something over at Spanish Fort?
We lost everything downtown, and we did everything from out there.
Yeah, because that's what we got.
Yeah, and we were on television, and believe it or not, we got mail from Brunswick, Georgia. People listening to all of that. Well, up in the middle of the night like that, WAGA in Atlanta had gone off the air, and they were getting our Channel 5 in Brunswick, Georgia. And watching us idiots out there at the transmitter. We'd set up a camera out there next to the transmitter. Very unofficial. Very unofficial. And they asked, well, I told the people, I said, look, we're with you. We know that a lot of you folks are absolutely scared to death out there. You're hiding in stairwells and in closets. I want you to know we'll stay with you as long as we can. If you think you've got it bad, we're sitting under a 1,000-foot tower with a 2.5-ton antenna sitting on it, on top of it, and nobody with a grain of sense would do a thing like that. So, and the mail, I've got a whole thing of mail down there that came in from that. But during that,
Let me say right
Yeah.
here before we get too far. Frederick hit, Camille hit in 1969 and Frederick hit in 1979.
yes,
Just to get that on the
I
calendar.
think it was about the 13th of September that it hit. It was on a Wednesday night. About 9:15, we lost all the AM radio. Didn't know what had happened. Later found that all 3 towers were down, along with a whole lot of other stuff down out there. But people who haven't been through a hurricane don't understand. And I got the crew out there, I guess about 3 in the afternoon. And the wind was whistling through the guy wires on the tower, and it was really windy, and they thought a hurricane was here. And I said, no, I'll let you know when the hurricane gets here. And about 9:15, it got here. And that's when we lost the 3 towers, and all kinds of hell broke loose. That's Baptist hell, worst kind of hell. Makes Methodist hell look like a picnic. Well, anyway, one of the radio men, who evidently had come from North Dakota or something, used to snow but not hurricanes, I had warned them, when this thing really gets going, do not open that door. Well, he had to look outside and see what it looked like. And Terry and I were taking some information in on 2 meters and writing it down to put it on the air, and we couldn't get over there to what he was doing. And we heard the door open, and water rushed across the room and hit up against the FM transmitter. It was running down. I could hear all this. Oh my God. And finally you heard the door close. And down around the corner came this guy covered with sand and leaves, sopping wet, just as unconcerned. We told folks that this fella had just learned about hurricanes. So even that had its amusing aspects. But there were days after that were just absolutely exhausting. We had to get the AM back on the air. And we have wonderful people out there, all of whom have died since then. But we had wonderful people out there who, we got that thing back on a generator, ran for 2 weeks on a generator, ran television for 2 weeks on a generator. Yeah, power company, they wanted to know how desperate we were, and I said, look, if you've got other people that really need the power, you hook them up, because we're on the generator and we'll just keep it going. Every now and then we'd say, look, we're going to close down and check the oil in the generator and check the water in it, and we'll come back up as soon as we can. And it was all very unofficial, and we tried to play it like people just talking to one another. Yeah. Television. We had a colored lady who worked with Connie B. Holt. Remember Connie B. Holt?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Connie B. had a colored lady whose name was Estelle.
Yes, that's right. I
All
remember her.
right. And Estelle and I had a very special rapport, but it was unspoken. There was something I just recognized in her more than what was on the surface, and evidently, for some reason or other, she maybe recognized something like that with me. I don't know. But one day, she came back to my office, and she had in tow with her this tall black man. And she came in and says, I have somebody here I want you to meet, and I want him to meet you. And she introduced him. And his name was Hank Aaron.
Oh my goodness. What a
Hank
treat.
Aaron. And he stood over Estelle and smiled. Now you know this was not his idea of a fun day, being led around to see some guy back in an office somewhere that he'd never heard of before. But he did it because he loved Estelle. And you could tell by the look on his face and the smile on him that he was doing something he knew that she liked and enjoyed.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of respect for that man because of that. Yeah. So, what else do you?
That was a treat.
We left Fairhope a long time
Well,
ago.
that's all right. We've got a lot of
Interesting.
interesting stuff here.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it affected Fairhope.
That's right.
All that
Well,
that you did
much of
made
that
a lot of
did.
difference here.
Much of that did. And do you remember the Mickey Mouse Club?
Mm-hmm. My kids.
You don't
grew up
remember the
on
Mickey Mouse Club?
On TV, yeah.
A mere kid. Well, back in the middle 50s, why, we carried Mickey Mouse Club. And it was
He was
ABC.
born in the middle 50s.
Well, it was an ABC program, though we were CBS. But EAR didn't take it. So we got it on film. And every day, 5 days a week for an hour, from 5 until 6, we ran the Mickey Mouse Club. The break at 5:30 was always a Coca-Cola spot at 5:30 and all the way around. And it was like that for years, really. And news was 15 minutes at the top of the hour, and then the network news for 15 minutes at 6:15. And then off to what, no telling what at 6:30, I forget now. Years later, and then many friends later, Kevin O'Neill, remember Kevin? Popeye Cartoon Theater. Kevin died, and he and I were really good friends. He was a gentleman. He loved his wife and his kids. He was a good thinker and a good friend, and he'd call me up and just give me some of the darndest stunts on the telephone. But he died, and he used to come in and lean on those projectors, and I always fuss at him. Don't lean on the projectors, Kevin. And along with a lot of other people, George Melvin, one of the announcers. You might recognize if you saw a picture of him. But a year or so ago, I bought one of those projectors, and it's over in my living room. And it's the one that ran the Mickey Mouse Club every day for several years.
I'll have to bring my children
Isn't
out
that
to
something,
see it.
though? Mickey Mouse Club, yeah.
They grew up on Mickey Mouse Club.
Well, all those horrible films we ran on the afternoon matinee. Remember those? Yeah, afternoon matinee. And I can't remember the name of some of the people in these things, but they were really, if you have B pictures and C pictures, this was a notch before that, I think. Remember, oh fudge, the guy that played Jungle Bob.
Don't remember that.
Oh yeah, I cannot remember his last name. Yeah, that's the way it goes sometimes, isn't it? I'll think of it.
Victor Mature.
What's that?
Victor Mature.
Victor Mature was at 20th Century Fox and RKO, and he made pictures during the 40s and 30s for the most part. Yeah, you didn't think I knew that, did you? You said,
I figured you knew that, yeah.
Yeah. I have one of his pictures down there with Betty Grable, and I'll probably run on this screen here. And the thing that impresses me about that, when I ran the Betty Grable films back in the early 40s, I was not that impressed with her. A pretty girl, but I don't know, maybe it's because I was young or whatever. Okay, pretty girl. There are a lot of pretty girls around. We ran one entitled Song of the Islands. The little picture, one of the first Technicolors at Fox. Victor Mature and Betty Grable. And it probably cost them all of $15 to rent it for a Sunday, Monday play day. And jam-packed the place. Jam-packed the place. So a few months later we ran it again. Then a few months later we ran it again and jam-packed every time. So when it became available, I bought a print of it, and it is just plain fun. And the thing that I notice about it is, golly, she was a doll. She really was. She was a doll, but they did not flaunt her, and that I appreciate so much in this time, day and time. Pretty girl, pretty for pretty's sake, and none of the slam bang, Wallapalooza foolishness that you got so much of now.
Yeah.
It was a different world, different time.
That's true. Very different.
Yeah. I have all the old MGM musicals down there, and many of the Fox and a lot of the.
You had them on film or on tape?
Most of them are on tape, but I run them on a screen that size, the Fairhope screen, and with really good sound.
Oops.
And
I don't think I can get your screen out.
Yeah,
I know I
you have
can't
to
get your
back up.
screen in.
but
It's a big one.
the soundtrack, some of those old tracks are awfully good, especially Warner Brothers. Warner's recording was fabulous from the early 40s on. Interesting story. My sister and I, you remember Lois Gale?
Yeah.
Well, she passed away about 4 years ago. I miss her dearly. I really do.
I didn't know that.
We were close and we weren't. I knew she was there on the other end of the telephone. She lived in Pensacola, and I could call her anytime. It would be old home week. And we'd gone through so much together. And I loved her dearly. And she passed away of cancer.
Well, I'm sorry to hear
I
that.
miss her dearly. But anyhow, one night we went down to the Colonial Inn. Robert Cummings was staying there. Remember Robert Cummings?
Yeah.
Bob Cummings. Maybe you remember the show that he had on NBC. But anyhow, he had always made little pictures with, he would make some of the pictures, early pictures for Deanna Durbin. And one with Betty Grable entitled Moon Over Miami. We went down there and sat with him. And we talked, and he was just completely open fellow. But he was a little uptight about one thing. He was making his first picture, about to make his first picture at Warner Brothers. And he'd always done these little light, little flighty movies. And this was going to be a serious part, a drama for sure. And he had the script with him. And it was entitled King's Row with Ronald Reagan.
Oh, yes.
And a perfectly adorable Ann Sheridan. She was a doll in that film. And when we ran the movie, of course now when I run it, it gets to me because I remember my sister sitting next to him while we talked and read over some of the lines in the script. But when I ran the movie at the Fairhope Theater, it was odd to hear the dialogue that we had been rehearsing with him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was something. But now I run it, and I marvel at the technical end of it. The recording was just fantastic. The work those people did was just superb. And the direction, the movement of the camera, the timing of the dialogue, the scoring of the music, the whole thing, just flawless piece of work. But still again, I look at him and I remember that sitting right next to him was Hoochie Toochums. Who's Hoochie Toochum? That was my sister Lois Gale. Oh, I see, yeah. So one day, I was going with a girl sort of over in Loxley. And her idol in all the world was Jeannette McDonald. There was nobody in the world to equal Jeannette McDonald. Wonderful Jeannette McDonald. Well, Jeannette McDonald was coming to Mobile. And she was going to be at Murphy Auditorium. I'd already seen her at the Sanger. She was there one time too. But she was going to be at Murphy Auditorium. And it produced two things. One of them was, I got the tickets to take Ginger, the girl, to see her at Murphy. And then I got a strep infection that darn near did me in. Darn near did me in. Well, I couldn't go. So I gave the ticket to Ginger and her mother to go over. But I was going to try to get Ginger backstage to meet Jeannette McDonald. I wouldn't be there. But I knew Jeannette McDonald was staying at the Grand Hotel. And I called the Grand Hotel and asked for Jeannette McDonald, and she answered the phone.
Oh, my goodness.
And I told her I had with me the most ardent and the cutest, most enthusiastic Jeannette McDonald fan that you have ever seen. And that would surely like for her, appreciate it if she could meet her at the concert tonight. And she said, well, she would just be delighted to meet Ginger after the concert. And Ginger got on the phone briefly, and it was one of these things that, are you Jeannette McDonald? Are you sure you're Jeannette McDonald? Oh, it's Jeannette McDonald, you know, enthusiasm. But anyway, they went over, and Jeannette McDonald put on her concert. And when the concert was over, a man stepped out on the stage, and all the people were leaving. A man stepped out on the stage and asked for Ginger Bodle. And would she come backstage?
Oh, my goodness.
And they went backstage, and she talked with her for 45 minutes.
Oh, my
Didn't wash her right hand for days.
Oh.
But I'm sure, because Ginger was so bright and so cute and so effervescent and sincere, something that isn't really part of the world that Jeannette McDonald worked in,
Yeah.
that she remembered Ginger to her dying day, I'm sure.
Oh.
It was a great experience for Ginger, but I think it was every bit as great for Jeannette McDonald. During that same time, she was staying at the Grand Hotel, and there was no colored balcony at Murphy's, so the colored people couldn't go see her.
Oh, no.
Yeah. She found that out, and she had a piano wheeled into the kitchen at the Grand Hotel, and she put on a concert there for the black people at the hotel.
Oh, how wonderful. Yes.
Isn't that great?
I should say. My
Yeah.
goodness.
Wait for a second.
You want to run that
Yeah.
film and get that over with?
I have.
Do you have to go now? Okay, let's.
Well, pretty soon.
Okay, hold on.
I've
Let's,
been up
let's,
since
we'll
3,
pause
right?
for a minute and then come back to you. I just jerk this thing every now and then. Okay.
Somebody said pan left.
Yeah, right. I'd say, huh? Okay. We took time out to see Curtis's film on Fairhope, which is absolutely fantastic. Took me back. It took us all back 30 or more years, and we want to thank you very much for showing it. And if you have any more comments to make for posterity, this is your chance.
I don't know what they would be. But if we sat and talked, why, man, particularly with just an interplay of discussion, things pop up.
That's right.
And with old timers, of course, and things do pop up.
You have to jog our memories.
Yeah, I remember one night, Mark Arnold and I, we used to talk a lot. Get under a street light and talk. We'd talk about, does God really exist, and you know, and sometimes real important things. And of course, Carolyn would come up from time to time in our discussion. I would say maybe 90%.
She's come up several times tonight. I think you
Yeah.
also had a crush on her.
Well, actually, I went with her sister. Went with Eloise.
Oh, you went with Eloise.
Yeah.
Well, so did my husband.
Oh, really? Well, that means he's got good taste.
There you go.
Yeah. But anyway, Mark and I were out walking around and discussing things, and we came upon the place behind the old Clump Motor Company where there used to be a bridge. Well, the bridge was out, and all they had were some 12-inch I-beams going across, two of them, just two. That's two. And there was one of these, what we call smudge pots, a little black thing looked like a bomb, and it was burning away in order to warn people not to drive into the gully. Which
Now, this is the bridge on Bayview, near Cliff Drive. Is that what you're
well,
talking
yeah,
about?
right behind what used to be Clump Motor Company.
Yeah, but, well, yeah.
Yeah, and so it was a kind of rainy kind of a night, and the weather was unstable. Mark and I decided we'd see if we could blow that thing out. That thing might blow out. It's possible that it would blow out and somebody get killed. And then there was the scientific approach to it too. Could it be done?
Mm-hmm.
So I wound up pretty good and blew like crazy and couldn't blow it out. Mark wound up like crazy and in one mighty gust blew it out.
Oh,
Yes. And as the curling smoke of from the kerosene was curling up, I looked up, and there, standing there, was Swifty, the town cop. I looked at him, and he was looking down at us, very, very kind of severe-like. And I looked up and I says, "You got a match?" Swifty had a match. We lit it, and so we proved the scientific fact they can be blown out. So it was all in the interest of science, of course. So, yeah.
Very
You
good.
warned him.
You should have admonished him that the city was not protecting the citizens properly. 'Cause
Yeah,
this
that's right.
place
Somebody
could be
should have
blown
stopped those two idiots from blowing up smudge pot. Oh my! Well, there was always something like that, though. They used to complain at me because I didn't have a light on my bicycle. Well, of course, back then that was the only way to get around at all. But batteries, I had a light on my bike, but no batteries. And they cost a dime a piece, and it took two. And so I didn't often have one. And the police stopped me one night and admonished me rather thoroughly that I should have a light on there. So I had a lot of scrap film from the theater, And I made this thing with a roller and a fire trap, put it on the back of the bicycle, and a kind of a luggage carrier thing was back there. And you'd light the top end of it, and then as you went, the sprocket would move the film on up, and it would burn, and you could be seen. Everything went fine. And one night I was coming, yeah, really, I was coming back from Jerome Klein's house, who was one of those who used to be in the Clyde fights, by the way. But he lived out behind the Busy Bee. And I was going through town, and that blasted fire got around the fire trap to the roll underneath it. And I had a fire there the size of a bushel basket right at my wallet.
Oh my goodness.
And the only thing I could do was take off and go like crazy through town to keep the wind, keep low until it burned its way out. And I tore through town, and to the delight of the town policeman. And I could be seen, but I bought batteries after that. Oh my, one night Steve Riggs and I were down at the bay and walking along where the ducks are about where they are now. And it was kind of a lover's lane down there, not Steve and I, but we were walking. One of the things we did was we sang a lot, and we came upon this parked car. We thought we would serenade the inhabitants of the car, the occupants, and so we sang our favorite song, Noel. It was probably in July or August, but Noel was when we knew the words of it. So came to the high note at the end. I always took the high note there, and this football player came out of the car, great big guy, and I took off like a shot. But Steve was just getting over a broken ankle. You saw him with the crutches in the film a minute ago, and the guy caught him, and he took Steve by the shoulder, and he went kerwhop, picking him up and slamming me down, and warned him that any more of that kind of foolishness would result in a slow and grinding and terrible death. And I had concluded that I didn't think our singing was that bad. I mean, we decided that probably he and his girl were in there reciting poetry or reading or something, you know. And, so
And you were disturbing.
well, yeah,
Yes,
I probably did.
yes.
Little vignettes like that you remember.
Oh, you could write a book. Why don't you?
I did.
No, you did. What's the name of it?
It's entitled A Letter to My Kids, or It Wasn't That Funny at the Time.
Very good. Have you published it?
No. It was designed to, well, my dad died when I was 10. I knew little about him, and not much about how he thought or what irritated him, what made him happy or anything else, really. And I didn't want that to be the way with my kids, so I gave them a pretty good history of my life from Illinois and down here, and Eloise and all the marvelous things that ever happened to me, and the bad things too. Believe it or not, a few bad things happened.
You want to tell us about them?
Well, it would be hard to come up with anything that was. No. I've had such a wonderful life, really.
Okay.
When I went with Eloise, and I just thought she was the most wonderful thing it ever was, and she was. She was a person of integrity and honesty and directness, and a beautiful, beautiful girl. And not only that, but she thought I was wonderful. Well, that shows good taste right off. But then she went her way, and that really sobered me up. Yeah, really. And I had another girl up in State Line, Mississippi, who once again was the classiest, most beautiful, and nicest girl in town, really. And then she went her way, and I got kind of discouraged about that time. In fact, became rather depressed. There was a time. But then I owned the beach theater, and I needed a cashier. And I hired this fabulously beautiful girl with the biggest blue eyes you ever saw, and long flowing blonde hair, and girl all over. And my. And her name was Joy West. And within a year, we married.
Well, for heaven's sakes.
And I'm dead sure, I'm serious about this now. I'm sure that God brought her to me. I'm dead serious. Just as sure as I'm sitting here. He brought her to me.
And you're still married to her?
Oh, yes. And my question back then was, well, why did he wait so long? And then I realized she was 16 when we married. I was 26.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that great though? But we've had 9 children. And out of all of those, the last 2 were twins. And they were just a fabulous experience. And my comment there is that somewhere along the way, I must have done something good. I have no idea what it was, but they are my reward.
Oh.
Yeah, truly. So yeah, Joy and I have been married for 43 years.
Well, that's
And
wonderful.
just
Yeah,
great,
beautiful.
just great, just great.
Yeah, beautiful.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know them.
Yeah.
Well, they are cute, all right. They really are, and sharp, 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 sharp.
Yeah, well, they tend to do that and makes the parents feel like
Well,
we missed something.
They're terrific. That is nice.
That's great.
Yeah. So I suppose that's about the whole story for the evening.
Okay, well, I'm glad you got over Eloise and the other girl.
Oh, you don't get over things like that. If somebody, I made quite a study of that in later years. If you ever loved anybody, you still do. If you really loved them, and if you loved them for reasons, if they're lovable people, if they had the characteristics that one could love and would love. And I don't know what happened to her after she went her way, but I know her lifestyle was as divergent from mine as it was possible to get. And I always wondered about that. Of course, in my case, like I said, I was considered tame, which translates to dull, and she became a party animal, and I never did. I've stayed just like I was. But during the time we went together, she and I saw the world identically in so many different ways. Our reactions are the same toward things, and they are now. And that may be one reason that she went her way, that we have the same irritations, the same things bug us, the same things make us happy and all. That might be part of it, I don't know. But if you ever love somebody, you still do, and it doesn't interfere with anything, with anybody, anything else. It's just that's the way it is. And you remember very fondly beautiful things in your life.
That's true. I can vouch for that.
Yeah, sure. And to say to discredit all of that, we throw in a degree of cynicism that I don't want to muddy the waters with. No, it was a beautiful time of my life. And you have to consider too that it was a time when you didn't have to worry about a lot of things. We only had us to worry about.
That's true.
And we didn't worry. We didn't have to worry about rent. We didn't have light bills, water bills, or anything like that. We didn't have to worry about pregnancy, diapers.
We knew
any
how
of
to
those
avoid
things.
that, didn't we?
There were always, those are all things that people who are about to marry need to take into consideration. And you need to live above those requirements. Don't let them get you down. They are requirements. You have to fulfill them. Let it go at that. Do your job and live above all of that. And I think too many today, when the glory of the honeymoon is over, why, here comes the gloom. Here come the grocery bills and the rent and all of that kind of thing. And ultimately the diapers. That is discouraging, diapers, yes.
And the 2 o'clock feeding.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, talk your arm off, you guys.
Well, we really do thank you both for talking with us and for showing us the film. It's been a memorable evening. And if you think of anything else, we'll be back.
I see.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're on another one.